Time is a man-made construct, and it's just so essential to everyday lives. But where does their significance come from? Why are we so dependent on it? Well, how about we go back in time and we check this out. While we're there, we can also look at how the environment and our culture has impacted upon it. We might even be able to look into the future. So come on,
If
let's
I
go.
could turn back time, if I could find a way.
So back in Neanderthal days, even cavemen had to have an understanding of time if they were to survive. You can't go hunting if the sun is going down, can you? It'll be too dangerous. So they had to base their hunting around when the sun was in the sky. This dependency led to a prehistoric clock, if you will, built with sticks and the shadow that was caused. The Egyptians were the first civilization to build upon this into what we know as the sundial, which is a more advanced form of the sticks and shadow. A sundial works by the middle pillar, a gnomon, causing a shadow via the sun. The length of the shadow dictates the time of day. So sundials are great so long as it is sunny. But what happens if it's overcast or raining? Enter the water clock. Early versions of the water clock are estimated to come around 270 BC. A water clock works by allowing water to drip at a constant rate along smooth stones into a cylindrical container. The container is marked at intervals. Once the water hits one of these intervals, an hour, or the equivalent at the time, is believed to have passed. These were similar to hourglasses and candles. Once the sand sifts down to the bottom of the glass, an hour is believed to have passed. Much the same with a candle burning down to a designated part. In 1335, the first mechanical clock was built in Milan, and it worked as church bells. So back in this era, the clocks didn't have faces or hands. In fact, they relied entirely upon the men who worked inside to ring these bells at the right time. The sounds of the bells either meant a new era had begun, or the beginning of a very significant moment to the church. So in 1656, there was a Dutch inventor named Christian Huygens, and I won't be pronouncing his name again. And he invented the pendulum clock, to this point in time the most accurate clock ever created. It was only off by only a minute a day. The pendulum clock works by the swinging weight going back and forth at regular intervals, never speeding up nor slowing down. Once the pendulum is at its highest point, a gear is turned inside the clock. The problem with the pendulum clocks is that they rely on gravity, which means gravity changes depending on where you are, whether it's at altitude, close to the sea, or close to the equator. So the time it takes the pendulum to swing will change depending on where you are. So in the early 1800s, the most important clock was created, the small clock, eventually becoming the wristwatch and the pocket watch. So the small watch operates from a spring that is wound around a dial, which is manually operated. So as the spring uncoils itself, it rotates the gears to the appropriate speed. So after the most important creation, perhaps the most important event, happened in 1884, where Greenwich Mean Time became universal. It became the time standard. Now what this meant is that at the time, there was all these different time zones across the globe, so it was very hard to organise things with another city or another country. So what this mean time did is that it just meant everything was interlocked. Okay, which meant it didn't matter in the world where you were, you knew what time it was in another city or another country. This made it really easy to organise things. Now what followed on from here is 24-hour time, where the start of the day starts at 0000 and finishes at 23:59. Over the years, the design of the clock, the rotating gears to turn a dial, has stayed relatively the same. Now, however, batteries are used to turn the cogs instead of the manual dial. In 1956, one of the most useful pieces of technology was ever created. It's also the most annoying piece of all time, the digital alarm clock. These days, scientists are trying to develop the most accurate time they can. And in 1999, they invented the most accurate clock of all time, the NIST F1 Cesium fountain clock. Now this clock is so accurate, it is only off 1 second in 20 million years. Now if that was available to the public, that is one clock you'd never be late with.
Because I had the time of my
Did you know that up until World War One, only women wore wristwatches? They were thought of as second rate by men preferring the pocket watch. During the war, however, pocket watches became impractical, and so wristwatches became a necessary piece of equipment on the battlefield. After the war, wristwatches became fashionable for both men and women. What is interesting now, though, is that watches have become a fashion statement. The brand of the watch has become a symbol of wealth, style, and superiority.
It just takes some time, little girl, in a little out the right, everything.
Depending on where you live will result in your perception of time. People who come from Western countries, such as the USA and Australia, see time in three distinct stages: the past, the present, and the future. We can't change the past, but we can do what we want in the present now, and we know that this will affect our future. People who come from an Eastern background, they will generally view time as cylindrical, a pattern that keeps on repeating. Someone is born, they'll grow up, they have kids, they die. The person giving life to their children means that the process has restarted again. Another interesting variant is what people from Madagascar believe. Where we believe that the future is in front of us, people from Madagascar believe that the future is behind them, as their eyes cannot see it yet.
Time after time, if you fall, I will catch you, I'll be waiting.
As previously discussed, the perception of time was a necessity of survival at a very primitive time. The ability to find food during the day and to make it back to shelter before nightfall was integral to survive. Similar to that was the idea of seasons, when animals would be in abundance and when food would be scarce. Now that we have evolved into a much more advanced species, our ability to comprehend time past our own existence has increased. We can acknowledge that time goes on, not only on our own planet, but in galaxies outside of our own. We now know that time isn't a set speed, and it can be sped up or slowed down in the right environment. It's hard to say where time will go from here. The actual time is on everything that we own that contains a battery. Think about it. Our phones, oven, microwave, TV, laptop, iPad, it all contains the time. And why wouldn't it? We're so reliant on it. Our daily lives are so structured around time. We have to be in a certain place at a certain time. I'd like to think in the near future we could have a chip placed into our wrists which displays the time, so we don't have to wear a watch. And it could appear whenever we want it to. But this may be getting too far into sci-fi life for some people. On another level, atomic clocks of today are used to calculate time and distance in space. As discussed before, the NIST F1 cesium fountain clock is accurate to 1 second in 20 million years. As we discover more of the universe and set our sights on further reaches of it, our need to build a more advanced clock capable of calculating over such a vast distance will increase. Scientists are at the moment developing an atomic clock which will be accurate to 1 second in 5 billion years. To put this in perspective, this means that they'll be able to calculate the distance between the Sun and Earth to the size of a single bacteria. Now that is accurate. If we want to explore more of our galaxy, we'll need to design and build clocks even stronger than that one.
Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life. So take the photographs and still frames in your mind, hanging on a shelf in good health and good time. Tattoos and memories and dead skin on trial. For what it's worth, it was worth all the while. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time